Everyone thinks I'm innocent, but I've been secretly meeting my ex at a lake house in the woods, and I can hear how that sounds even as I say it to you now, like a campfire rumor that gets told with a flashlight under the chin, but I'm the one with the matches. I'm Sarah, I'm 31. And I'm a junior high English teacher who spends my days telling 7th graders that every story has consequences while my nights are a choose-your-own adventure where I keep turning to page 63 and pretending. Page 64 won't come for me anyway. I could give you the saintly version. I'm the responsible one with the labeled spice jars, the woman whose Google Calendar pings and she actually goes. But the truth is I've been driving 2 hours out of town with the windows down and a tote bag in the trunk that looks like a picnic and is actually a confession. I keep saying I'm the kind of person who doesn't do this, and then I do it again, and it's not even dramatic most of the time. It's quiet, it's the sound of gravel under tires, it's a lake that looks like still glass until a wind decides it's a mouth. My husband's name is Jonah, and he's the sort of gentle that makes dogs sit down just to be near it. He manages a community garden, which means his shirts are always a little stained with chlorophyll and his phone is full of photos of squash blossoms like proud baby pictures. He is a good man in that practical way that resists poetry. He sharpens the knives, he remembers our neighbor's cat has allergies, he refills the wiper fluid without being asked and doesn't announce it like a medal. When he laughs, he turns his head a little, like the sound might embarrass him if it had to look us in the eye. With him, our apartment is a soft hum, early bedtimes, leftovers that taste better the second day, 2 mugs on the drying rack. No villain lives here. That's what makes me look worse in the mirror. There isn't a scar to point at and a judge to convince. There's only me. The lake house belonged to my ex's aunt and now it belongs to paperwork. It hovers in that in-between where nobody's there and taxes are still being argued with. It sits on the north elbow of a narrow lake that gets black and secretive in August, surrounded by pines that shed their needles like sighs. The wraparound porch tilts a little, just enough that a marble would choose a direction if you put it down. The screen door complains like an old man. There's a canoe flipped over under the porch and a tin bucket full of mismatched nails beside the woodpile and a wind chime that always sounds like it's trying to remember a tune it knew before winter. The first time I went back there, the smell hit me mid-breath, pine, damp wood, a faint thread of last season's smoke, and I felt like I'd stepped into a photograph that had never stopped developing. My ex is called Theo. If you think that's a name that arrives with a guitar and a nervous grin, you wouldn't be wrong. We met when we were 23 and earnest enough to think coffee could cure character flaws. He played cello in a community orchestra and fixed bikes in a shop whose owners believed Greece was a lifestyle. I wrote lesson plans at midnight and believed Shakespeare could improve posture. We loved the wrong way, which is to say we loved like we were running a relay race and kept forgetting to hand the baton back. We broke like a clean plate that someone drops and then superglues. Usable, yes, but you see the seams every time the light hits it right. He said we weren't growing together. I said we'd make a plan. He said we already had 100 and they were all hamsters on a wheel. I said the phrase emotional labor too loudly and he laughed, and then we hated ourselves for being cliches. He left for a job at a music nonprofit in a different city with better trains. I stayed and married steadiness. I didn't see him for 3 years. And then he showed up the way old songs do in a grocery store. Right when you're choosing pasta, suddenly there it is, and you pretend it doesn't make your hand shake over the rigatoni. We were loading boxes at a book drive hosted in the school gym. I heard his voice before I saw him, that particular warmth that turns syllables into cocoa, and I thought, you have got to be kidding me, like the universe had a roll call for bad timing and my name was always near the top. He looked older in the way I like best. Not worn exactly, just arranged differently by the weather. We said each other's names the way you say the word home when you've lived other places. The house came up because houses do that when exes make small talk. My aunt's place is just sitting, he said, surrendering keys I couldn't see into imaginary hands between us. I said I was sorry about his aunt and meant it. Theo said they were figuring out probate, everyone's favorite family sport. I asked whether the wind chime still sounded like a question. He laughed, and the laugh felt like walking into a warm room from a sharp day. Come up, he said, then blushed, then flailed. I mean, if you want, I'm going Saturday to clean out the gutters and curse at the freezer. I nodded because my mouth had other priorities, remembering what it was like to be an old version of myself who once believed in default joy. The first drive out, I made a deal with myself that I'd break later. I would go once and I would not bring any lies home. The highway gives up to 2 lanes and then one, and eventually it's just you and the road and a surprise mailbox shaped like a trout. The lake appears suddenly, a dark slash behind cattails, and if you're like me, you pull into the wrong turnout the first time and think, well, maybe that's a sign. It wasn't. I backed up, found the right gravel, and there he was kneeling on the porch with a screwdriver in his mouth like a cliché I had personally ordered. We didn't touch. Not at first. We did that decency dance exes do where you admire infrastructure. You painted the trim, I said. You kept your hair, he said, which is not something people say, but it made us both snort because it was better than saying the obvious. Inside, the sofa still had the blanket his aunt crocheted, a wild, adventurous green that should have clashed with everything and didn't. There was a mug that said, "I'm not mourning, I'm mourning," which is the kind of joke that makes me both cringe and adore because it tells on you and refuses to be ashamed. We made tea because you can't undo certain muscle memories. He put the kettle on and I opened the kitchen window and the smell of the lake walked in like a friend who knows where the glasses are kept. If you're waiting for the thunderbolt, I'm not going to give it to you. Lightning can be honest, but it's also lazy. It was a small weather. It was his hand brushing a pine needle off my sleeve and me saying thanks like thanks had been invented that afternoon. It was a silence that didn't demand anything of us for a whole minute, which is the portion of peace my life had been rationing me for too long. It was me looking at the list he'd made on a brown paper bag of chores to do, gutters, freezer, door hinge, and teasing him for his handwriting even though I'd always loved it for the way the GS looped round like they were hugging something. We climbed on the roof and cursed at sap and laughed when the handle of the bucket snapped and sent pine cones bowling. We stood without touching and looked out over the black water and the white scratching of wind on it and shed a breath that wasn't romantic but was absolutely intimacy and should have been enough. It wasn't. So yes, we kissed eventually. It happened just after he whacked the screen door to get it to sit right and it finally did and we cheered like idiots, and then we looked at each other and physics, that traitor, whispered why not. I felt like the porch tilted and then thought maybe it was just me. I should have felt horror. I felt like a page turning in a book that wanted to be read again even though you already knew the ending wasn't neat. When we broke apart we didn't move, the way you don't breathe after you see something rare and you believe if you don't disturb the air maybe it will stay. This is wrong, I said, because you have to say that sentence once to earn saying all the other ones. It is, he said. And he didn't finish the sentence, which I loved him for because finishing it would have been a plea and he didn't want to plead. He wanted to be the place I came to rehearse being honest. Driving home, the trees leaned in the way they do when evening tries on a dark address and I tried to think words into existence like guardrails. I told myself I wasn't an affair person. I told myself I'd been lonely, which was both true and not an excuse that admired itself. I told myself I'd confess. When I got to the apartment, Jonah had made a pot of soup big enough to mean well, and he kissed my forehead like I was something he'd planted and was checking on. He asked how the book drive went. I said fine because sometimes lying is a towel you throw over a mess and tell yourself you'll deal with it after dinner. It didn't become a schedule. It became a whether I could check the way you click the app and pretend the prediction is justice. The second time I went, I told Jonah I had a department meeting I couldn't miss and he said, I didn't know they did Saturdays, and I said, budget crisis, and he grimaced in solidarity at the thing that eats schools alive and we never look it in the eyes. I hated myself in the car and then hated myself less when the pines began. At the house, we did chores until one of us said something true and then we did that instead. If you think it was only sweetness, you don't know us. He can be cruel the way thoughtful men can be, which is to say he forgets he's not in charge of narratives, and I punish with silence the way considerate women do, which is to say I withhold warmth to feel powerful and then feel only cold. We argued about the ethics of guilt like there were points to win. He said my marriage looked like a carefully tended garden where nothing wild was allowed to seed itself. I said he mistook chaos for authenticity because he had the privilege to clean up after floods. We apologized poorly. A raccoon knocked over the trash and we both laughed because nothing humbles you like a masked animal telling you your compost system is insufficient. At school I teach the most dangerous game, kids wide-eyed at the hunt and very proud of themselves when they spot foreshadowing. In the margins of my copy I write notes like point of view is a weapon and pretend innocence note long shadow. I told myself I was running a study in contradiction, A woman who put gold stars on posters that say integrity is what you do when no one is watching, then drove into trees and practiced a different definition. My students would see right through me. They saw everything. One morning, after we'd read a poem about a river that refuses to decide whether it is a path or a boundary, Kiana raised her hand and said, "Ms. Hale, what if the river is just a mirror?" I said, "Write that down," and then I went into the hallway and breathed like I was stealing air and texted Theo mirror, and he wrote back like. The night Jonah told me he thought I was far away even when I was sitting beside him, he said it like he'd been memoizing the line and hated it for rhyming. "I don't want to accuse you," he said. "I just want to know if I should ask where you go when you go." I could have told him everything. I could have told him nothing. I did the middle, which is the coward's refuge. "I'm tired," I said, which was true and not. He nodded like a man making allowances at a gate. "We could get away," he said. "A cabin?" I wanted to laugh in a way that would have made me unlovable. "Maybe," I said, which was a lie when what I meant was I already have one and the way I hold the key in my pocket has changed my posture. Here is a detail I can't stop picking at. There is a knot on the porch railing where the wood swirls like a fingerprint, and every time I lean there I touch it like a talisman, like it might take my secret and store it as tree wisdom. It's nothing. It's a circle of wood. It has held more honest palms than mine and it doesn't care. That's the trouble with the natural world, it can witness and refuse to judge, which is a kindness that sometimes feels like a scolding. One afternoon, winter kind and mean at the same time, snow beginning in a whisper, we dragged the canoe to the water even though it made no sense. We pushed off and paddled with the heavy grace of fools. The lake was a mirror cracked by geese. He rowed and told me about a concert he'd recorded in a church where the space became a second instrument, how the cello swallowed the room and gave it back warmed. I told him about a student who had started a secret poetry club, secret because 12-year-olds believe hiding is holy, and how they met at lunch to read Neruda and Takako Arai and eat oranges with guiltless joy. "You're good," he said, simple as a weather report. I said it back, "So are you," and felt the sentence sit down somewhere my stomach usually worries. Do you want to know the first time we almost got caught? It wasn't cinematic. It was a delivery driver in the lane wondering if anyone needed propane and me slipping behind the curtain like a theater extra invited to improvise. It was a neighbor's truck slowing and then continuing. It was a dog putting its paws up on the steps and breathing its damp breath through the screen and Theo whispering, "Hey buddy," with that smile that kills me because it's the one he saves for small creatures with honest needs. Nothing happened. That's the point. We think danger will be fireworks and instead it's a dog nose and your heart beats suddenly very concerned with its job. I tried to stop. I gave myself a month where I would not drive the road, where I would say yes to Jonah every time he suggested anything. We went to the farmer's market and ate peaches over the sink and called them summer. We watched a movie where the ending made him mad because no one deserved what they got, which is his favorite complaint about art and life. We made a list of places we'd like to go if money and time ever agreed to be friends. He put a lake house on the list and I looked at the T and H and E letters lined up so nicely together and felt like I'd been caught by a typo. But then the month ended and a storm came and the voice in my chest that sounds like bad advice and true desire said, "Just check the gutters." We did. We cleaned. We made eggs in the cast iron pan like a ritual. We sat on the floor with our backs against the sofa and read out loud lines from books we'd found in the bedroom. The aunt's taste ran to romance and mysteries where the murderer is the person who talked the least. We did not talk least. We also did not talk most about the thing that would have made us noble. What are you doing? What am I doing? Where does this go when it stops being a room? The lake answered by being itself. It allowed us. That might be my favorite lie that the world allows. It simply doesn't stop you. Jonah found a receipt I'd left in a coat pocket, a gas station 2 towns past where anyone has business being on a Wednesday. He set it on the table with the banana he'd packed for my next day, like he wanted the accusation to sit beside a small kindness so I could choose how to translate it. "You were there?" he asked, and I felt the words do their work. They pointed like a finger without moving. "I went for a drive," I said, which is something you can say and mean and be lying anyway. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked. Not poorly, I said, and he nodded like a man who knows that the first version of a truth is often its cheapest. He didn't press. He made tea. We drank it. We watched the steam do nothing but be beautiful and temporary. I keep thinking about a line from a poem my students love because it feels like a dare. I want to be improbable and beautiful and afraid of nothing. I write it on the board and we talk about the impossible algebra of it, how you can be afraid and still move. And then I drive to the lake and perform a different equation, how you can be afraid and still not move at all, at least not in the direction that would save you. If you want an answer, the tidy kind, you need to understand that I'm a woman who alphabetizes her pantry and can't alphabetize this. I still go sometimes and sometimes I don't. That is a stupid sentence and it is the truest one I have. There are weeks where the house is a thought I let pass like a bird shadowing the road, and there are days where the key is in my pocket before I realize I've picked up my bag. Theo has started to say things like, "We can't keep doing this," with a grown man's face that wants a plan, and I say, "I know," with the voice of someone signing for a package she didn't order. We have tried to say goodbye elegantly, which is why we keep failing. There's no elegance in this. There's only deciding who you're going to hurt on purpose. Here is something I have done that feels like the bravest act I can manage. I told one person. Not Theo. Not Jonah. My older sister, the one with the soft hands that always smell like flour. I sat at her kitchen table and said the sentence, the unsaintly one, the scandal one, the one that has made me into a stranger in my own mouth, and she didn't say, "How could you," or "Of course you," or "You're not that kind of person." She said, "Okay, and then, what do you want that you don't have?" I said, "A room where I can hear myself." She looked at me like I'd told her a recipe and said, "You could also build it at home." I cried into a dish towel and then stole it because it felt like it knew my face better than I do. The last time I went up, maybe the last or maybe not, I am not dependable in my endings, we didn't kiss. We fixed the stupid hinge that had been making half its living wage off our excuses. We swept the porch and put mothballs in a tin because the mice had gotten bold, and then we sat on the steps and ate apples without talking over the crunch. He asked what book I was teaching next. "The Giver," I said, and he groaned because everyone groans, and then he said, "The part where he sees color first still gets me," and I nodded because that's it, isn't it? We're both color drunk and pretending the gray doesn't have a case. I drove home at dusk with the smell of smoke in the air from someone's burn pile and the radio playing an old song that used to belong to us and now belongs to anyone with a car and a window. I pulled into our lot and sat for a minute like the car had more to say. Upstairs, Jonah had left the lamp on and it made the whole apartment look like a photograph of a safe house. I went in and he turned from the stove and smiled that small, careful smile men make when they want to give you somewhere to land and don't know the wind conditions. I said, "I'm here," and it was both a declaration and a lie and a vow, and we ate in the kitchen and didn't fix anything but hunger. If you wanted me to pick a lane at the end, I'm the wrong storyteller. I'm the woman at the fork waving a flashlight and apologizing for how the map smudges when it rains. I can tell you what I've learned, which is the kind of summary that 7th graders roll their eyes at and then secretly write down. Your body knows what you're doing before you do. A lake remembers every stone you throw even if you can't see the ripples because you'd rather look at the sky. Being innocent is a costume that fits until you raise your arms. The wood will hold your hand anyway. The screen door will complain and still open. The people you love will continue to prove they are people and not systems you can operate. And secrets, well, secrets are like raccoons. They get into the bins no matter how you arrange the bungee cords, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do is turn on the porch light and watch them for what they are. Tonight I'm grading papers at the kitchen table and a girl named Hazel has written, "I think the monster in the story isn't the creature, it's the waiting," and I drew 3 stars and wrote yes in the margin and had to put my pen down because the room tilted just a touch. Jonah is humming to himself in the living room, a wandering, contented tune that doesn't know it has an audience. I have not put the key back in the bowl by the door. It is still in my pocket, a small, cold truth. I can feel it against my thigh every time I shift. Everyone thinks I'm innocent. Some nights I almost am. Some nights I'm just a woman who keeps a promise to the worst part of herself and calls it a drive. Some mornings like this one I pour coffee and I pour it again and I look at the window and try to let it be only a window, not a mirror. I am trying. I don't know if that's redemption. It is, at least, a verb that requires my hands.